And in these larger agricultural models, it's like, well, we're valuing CBD content, THC content, maybe a few other cannabinoids, resin yield, bud structure, picking a few choice variables, valuing those, and then creating high intensity production models to churn, that out. And sometimes not recognizing that the consequence is sacrificing the unknown and possibly unknowable variables that are getting lost in that some of the more sort of craft cultivation, that's kind of what's been called now the craft cannabis world, where people were putting a lot of time and energy into much smaller numbers of plants, having a much more intimate relationship with those plants, understanding how they're changing and cultivating, handling them very delicately as they're being processed. Those products are very different than what gets churned out in high intensity sort of big ag, models. And I think there are places for all of this to coexist. I don't like seeing huge monoculture farms, period. And so, I've studied permaculture, so it's good that we have that common background. And my background in ecology, because before I got into all of this, I was working with the BLM, working on restoration projects, trying to understand native plant populations, the roles that they're serving in ecosystems, and kind of how we need to think about how to restore ecosystems that are in the process of falling apart, essentially, usually because of human activity. That thinking really needs to be integrated into cannabis, because cannabis has this such rich opportunity right now to do things differently than as has been established in big agricultural models for corn and wheat, all these. Yeah. And, unfortunately, the momentum is coming so fast and there's so much money to be made that it's like you're swimming against the current. But it's important, I think, to keep pressing that message and highlighting. And I think my point of saying all of this is, even with a reductionist model, the research, I think, is going to prove that perspective worthwhile and very valuable, that there are these hundreds, thousands of compounds being influenced and getting lost, and the therapeutic outcomes are not going to be the same.
Well, this all ties back to, how does cannabis fit into the medicinal plant toolbox, right?
Yeah.
And it's a complex answer, and I think there's a lot of folks out there. Well, and I'll say for me, I like to use cannabis a little bit separate. Most of the plants here, I'd like to think of them in terms of a formula.
Yeah.
How would I formulate that plant with other plants to make a medicine that's good for a person, for a condition?
Right.
And with cannabis, in the realm of topicals, I've been able to do that, much more easily, integrating cannabis in with topicals as far as mostly pain relief or inflammation control. But when it comes to, giving people an herbal formula to treat their constitution, I generally have cannabis as a separate tool. It's over here, and I can add it to what I'm doing, or I can, bring it in as a synergist if I wanted to help somebody sleep. Maybe they'll bring in some CBD to help them sleep, or if they're having anxiety, I could bring in some CBD, but also have a formula of herbs, that would be there to help them sleep as well. A nervine tonic, with things like Scutellaria, lateral flora, the American skullcap, and passion flower and things of that nature, kava, piper, things that are just going to be nice and calming, and then just bring the cannabis in separate. And again, I feel like I'm kind of playing in the dark with cannabis because of what you're talking about, because it's such a diverse plant with such a diverse array of constituents that then impart a diverse array of physiological effects that it's just hard to know it. And so, I feel like these sort of, I think I use the word boutique, you use the word craft, the kind of like the smaller care for medicine that people put into their products, where they're like, I really want this plant because it gives me this type of a feeling when I use it, when I smoke it or when I ingest it. And I really appreciate that, and that's not just, of course, those people want to make money too. Everybody's got to make a living, right?
Yeah.
But, we're at a point where I feel like there's two different divergent paths that cannabis is bringing us to. One is another big cash grab and another big, God, who cares about the environment? So I see it in the hospitals too. It's like, well, we just got to help this person right now. So just throw all this garbage away and don't worry about it for now. This is the emergency we're dealing with. And that's kind of what I've got to make this money. And this is my moment to make it. And I'll take care of it later. I'll pick it up later, but later never happens. Yeah, so we just keep making garbage. Right. And then that keeps happening. And there's that end of it. But then on the other side of it, there's this opportunity where I see that the way that people are seeing cannabis as an opportunity for resource, that can generate a lot of resource, that it's kind of acting like, as I've said before, the tip of the spear into an expansion of what our look at plant medicine really is. And it's deepening our sort of chemical analysis or our testing parameters, our extraction tools. Everything is changing and growing and becoming, just this focal on cannabis, but it can branch out to all the plants. Right. And we can start to take that technology and start enhancing our use of all plant medicine. I think it has that capacity. I'm hoping that we get that and not more of just the...
I think we will. I think, it's going to be going in both directions regardless. And it's a matter of, it's like how much energy is being put into each stream. And that's going to determine how far it gets over time. But going back to the springboard effect, almost everyone that I talk to when we're talking about cannabis, the conversation always ends up going beyond cannabis. And, when I do seminars or workshops or whatever, we get into discussions about cannabis, and someone always ends up making the connection on their own. Like, what does this mean for other plants? And what does this mean for food? And, starting to piece that together, that everything that we're learning about cannabis, it does apply directly. And then it opens up new perspectives about these other plants and how we can interact with them and think about them, research them. And, that's what I'm really excited about as a researcher is, I think that cannabis over time is going to end up influencing and promoting a lot of really interesting natural products research broadly, because it's going to change perspectives. And, it's cool as a scientist because that means that there will then be a lot of kind of low-hanging fruit, cool projects to do that aren't even necessarily that complicated, that you can do with all sorts of plants that's very worthwhile to do, to try to understand and build more information that other people will then use and go in other directions. And, we're all feeding this kind of hive mind, this, sort of higher level consciousness of, how culture and society is going to play out in the years to come.